Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. After a disastrous weekend for Ferrari in Brazil, the team's chairman has figured out who's at fault for them now falling to 4th in the Constructors' Championship. It's not the engineers who designed the car, it's not the structure of the organisation, it's not the politics behind the scenes. The real culprits, it seems, are the drivers. A remarkable assessment today, given where they currently are, where they might need to go in the future. Lots of other drama as well as a result of this. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. As I say, there's lots to get into. We're going to start here. Lando Norris becomes the first driver in the history of Formula 1 to win his first 11 Grand Prix at 11 different Grand Prix circuits. Now, nowadays we do have more Grand Prix on the calendar, so this is more achievable, but it's still quite remarkable, right? That all the Grand Prix that he's won this year, starting from Melbourne, Monaco, Spielberg, of course in Austria, Silverstone, Hungary, Mexico and Brazil, all of those Grand Prix that he won, he didn't win last year in the 4 that he did win. The next one we go to is actually Yas Marina, right? So he didn't win in Vegas last year, as we know. He didn't win in Qatar last year. But he did, of course, win in Abu Dhabi. If he wins again in Abu Dhabi, it's very difficult to see him not winning this World Championship. Wanted to get into some of the drama, though, again from yesterday, especially with regard to this incident at the restart between Oscar Piastri, Kimi Antonelli, and unfortunately for Charles Leclerc as well. So Piastri was pretty adamant afterwards that, you know, he wasn't so angry because he recognised that the reality is Norris is doing a much better job right now. His pace was nowhere near Norris's again this weekend. So while the incident was problematic and did, you know, the penalty definitely cost him points in the race for points yesterday, his pace was still nowhere near where he was happy with. We saw in that first stint when he was actually putting a bit of pressure on Norris after the virtual safety car restart, he very quickly vanished into the rear mirrors, right? But the penalty did affect things, as we know, may go on to affect the championship, who knows? It's still a long way to go until we get to the checkered flag in Abu Dhabi. But even Charles Leclerc thought the same way and says, well, look, is it totally on Oscar? No, not as far as Leclerc was concerned. Kimi sees there's Piastri, doesn't give him any room. Is it optimistic on Oscar's part? Maybe, but I think Kimi could have tried to avoid it. Frustrating, can't do anything. So, you know, there's lots to say on this. We talked about it yesterday. Based on what I saw yesterday, I'm confident that this should, based on the guidelines, be a penalty. Now, that's a different thing to saying that this should be penalised in general, right? But, you know, I think there was some discussion at the time to say, well, no, he's alongside, this should be fine. But no, according to the rules, this is very clear that he should have been penalised here. The question is, are the rules fair in this situation? Because Leclerc, poor Leclerc, man, and we'll discuss Ferrari in a second. Could Antonelli have done more to avoid the collision? Yes, I mean, you can see, especially in this screenshot right here, that there's more room for Antonelli to enjoy to his right. Okay, that would have made things very complicated for the next corner, but Piastri is going down the insides heavily. Antonelli could do more, but according to the guidelines, simply doesn't have to. I think my main concern about this from a racing guidelines perspective is that Piastri actually does try to avoid the contact here. I think that's probably why he locks up, really, is that he knows that it's not looking great. He's got to slow the car down as quickly as he possibly can. And yet, did he do the right thing by going for it from a championship mentality perspective? I think yes. Could he have decided to avoid this drama, live for another day, try and overtake on pace? You know, also I think probably yes. And if he was more confident in his own abilities, especially where he currently is compared to Norris, I think he probably would have done that. My concern is, though, that he tries to back out of this, right? He's gotten a bit too hot to a certain extent, but he tries to get out of it, and because he tries to get out of it, he's not alongside enough to be entitled to space. If Piastri here does, like, you know, a prime Max Verstappen and just absolutely sends it down the inside, doesn't even care that Leclerc's over there, just fully sends it down the inside, then probably he meets the guidelines of being entitled to space. And yeah, he would force Antonelli out wide. Maybe he would even, as a result of that, force Antonelli and Leclerc to come into contact anyway. But probably that's fine because Piastri was alongside enough to be entitled to room despite coming in very hot. Now, I still see a lot of misunderstanding on the racing guidelines, so I did just want to go through it because everyone says, oh, race of the apex, ahead at the apex and all this. That is relevant, but they have changed the rules. So just to clarify this, if you're overtaking on the inside of the corner, you must have your front axle at least alongside the mirror of the other car prior to and at the apex. So it's no longer about just diving into the apex. They literally say that in the guidelines, being driven in a fully controlled manner, particularly from entry to apex. This is what doomed Piastri. He didn't have the front axle alongside. He wasn't in a fully controlled manner. He had to be penalised on the regulations, is my opinion. Should the regulations be changed? Also a fair argument. So you can't dive in. But as I say, if he went in a bit hotter, he did, in this particular screenshot right here, find his front axle alongside the front axle of Antonelli. Maybe he almost nearly clips the back of Norris in the process. But he would have earned the right to space by doing so. Now, if it's considered a massive dive bomb, then the stewards may still say, not so sure about that. But that's effectively what the guidelines say. Now, Alex Brundle gives an interesting perspective on this. Because he was disagreeing with the penalty, the decision that was made, and he effectively said, look, he doesn't think it should be a penalty. Now, he also clarifies that on a second page of the guidelines, these are guidelines. These are not regulations. It literally says that at the front. These are guidelines, not regulations. There may be subjective judgment in play. So effectively, his argument is that don't take the guidelines at the letter. If you can override them by common sense, then you should. The stewards don't have to do anything, which I guess is true. But I think as fans, we want some level of consistency, and I'm not sure that I'm happy with the guidelines as they are. I don't think that I am. I think we want to encourage good racing, and the fact that Piastri has been penalised here discourages drivers from going for moves that were probably on, let's be honest. So I'm particularly happy with the regulations on that front. But also, I can look at this screenshot and I can tell you for a fact Piastri is getting penalised here based on the guidelines. And that's what happened. So do we want consistency, right? I think this is the debate, right? I think generally we want the guidelines to be better, but also I want to have some consistency. I don't want the stewards just deciding, well, it's common sense and probably this feels a bit unfair on Piastri, so we'll let him off, right? Like, you can do that, sure, but I think I'd prefer some consistency. I think that's kind of what fans want, but we can't have everything as F1 fans, it seems at the moment. That's the final comment on that. You know, this was the stewarding document. They describe exactly what I've said about why he was penalised. He got a 10-second penalty, 2 penalty points for this. The initial document said it brought him up to 8, but actually I think he's only at 6, so he's not particularly close to a penalty. So they got that one wrong, which was sensational. This is how things have gone over the last few rounds. Quite remarkable that during the middle of the season, Piastri and Lando were really neck and neck. It was nip and tuck for many a Grand Prix, and then after the DNF in Zandvoort, Lando has very much locked in, and well, the same cannot be said for Oscar Piastri. In fact, in recent rounds, Verstappen has scored 111 points, Norris 97, Russell 82, Antonelli 56, Leclerc 51, even the Ferraris are in the mix here, Piastri 42, right? So say what you want about the penalty, that is not the story of these last couple of months, and the championship gap is now 24 points in favour of Lando Norris. It's possible he can win the championship at this rate before Abu Dhabi, which, well, would be quite the result. You don't want to turn up to Abu Dhabi as Norris needing to get like 3rd or 4th or something to close out the championship. There's a lot of stress involved in that situation, so he will try and continue to lock in. We'll discuss more towards the end of the video what his mindset in that scenario looks like right now. There's also a bit of drama between McLaren and Red Bull. Welcome back, everyone. So Red Bull took a new engine for Max this weekend, and they effectively took that new engine for performance reasons, right? They were like, well, we're probably going to start from the pit lane anyway. We want to make these setup changes. We may as well just give him a full new suite of components as well, take the necessary penalties, but we're starting with the pit lane anyway, so it doesn't really matter, and he was starting P16 if we didn't. Now, there's a bit of debate, let's say, among the teams on cost cap. Now, this isn't about penalties. If McLaren wanted to take a new engine for Norris or for Piastri, they would also have to start from the pit lane or take a 10-second penalty or 10-place penalty if they were changing just one component. They're probably not going to do that. The question is around the cost cap, especially for this season and what it means for the future as well. Because some teams believe that if they have to take another power unit for reliability concerns, it shouldn't count towards the cap. Now, apparently the regulations aren't very clear on this. this is just kind of a gentleman's agreement between the teams and the FIA to say, well, if we have reliability concerns, we need to take another one. That shouldn't count in terms of monetary expense. Maybe you think that's fair enough. But also, it's a bit subjective, right? And quite clearly in this case, Red Bull have taken it for performance reasons. They've given him a brand new one because they might as well with 3 rounds to go in the season. So now McLaren are saying, look, make sure this counts, guys, or at least they want some clarification. Stella says, look, hopefully we get some conclusion to this. So it's not like a massive drama, but something that I thought was worth noting. McLaren now 756 points in the championship. Mercedes are in seconds. Quite a comfortable second, especially given that they're only racing one man in Red Bull Racing's Max Verstappen team. 366 for Max, or I think it's 341 for Max, but 366 for Red Bull, and then 362 for Ferrari. So they're now down in 4th place in the championship. It was a horrific weekend in basically every single way. And the question then is, who is to blame for the current circumstances at Ferrari? They've not gone very well in Brazil. Leclerc's not had a good time in Brazil over the last few years, really, either, even back to the Vettel days, as we know. But John Elkann, the chairman of Ferrari, came out today with a very remarkable statement. And I want to just express how remarkable this statement is, that the Ferrari journalist, or the Italian journalist who reports pretty much exclusively on matters to do with Ferrari, they have close ties to that organisation, to many of the people involved over there. They found it quite shocking what was said today. So De Keyser says, I said we had to be stunned in this 2025, but I also thought less than the see you later. Okay, the translation from Italian probably isn't perfect. I will share another assessment in a second from one of his colleagues. But there was quite a bit of drama going into this weekend about Ferrari, Hamilton. That relationship isn't going to last the longer term. You know, next year they're going to be there, but if 2026 doesn't go to plan, Hamilton may want to call it a day. Especially after Mexico, there were rumours that Ferrari were looking at Behrman and saying, oh, Behrman's done pretty well. He's in our academy. Could we bring him in at some point? Leclerc as well. They've got to be prepared for a post-Charles Leclerc world where he leaves Ferrari, which I'm not going to lie, based on what I've heard today, he might need to do, because this does not sound like a team that is going to win anything anytime soon with the way that John Elkann is talking today, in my opinion. But Hamilton was asked for comment about this and said, look, I've got a long-term contract, so I'm pretty far off talking about like further deals, re-signing, whatever the case is. So Hamilton kind of shut down any of those contract rumours. But he had a difficult weekend. I mean, the whole team had a difficult weekend in Brazil. He at least recovered with a good start in the sprint to score a couple of points. It's not like his pace was atrocious compared to Leclerc, but a couple of key laps when it mattered were a few too many tenths off, shall we say. But even then, if Leclerc's car, let's say the Ferrari, was on course to be P2, P3, something in the mix for the front row of the grid, which of course is where Ferrari absolutely should be, then even if Hamilton is a couple of tenths off his teammate Leclerc, which to be fair, the gap to Leclerc has been getting narrower as the season has gone on, and even this weekend, Hamilton was pretty much there, apart from his one crucial deciding lap in qualifying. Wasn't so good, couldn't get the rear tyres to work. Let's not forget in sprint qualifying as well, his lap was looking pretty good to probably make it into SQ3, but then Leclerc spun, and then the yellow flags ruined his lap, right? So, it's not even like Hamilton's pace lately has been that bad. His pace with respect to Leclerc has actually been getting better over the last few rounds. And yeah, he's not had a great season. You look at points, obviously the Grand Prix as well on the Sunday was not good either, had the incident with Sainz's first corner. But when you're starting further down the grid because the car isn't very good, what are you going to do? Sometimes these things happen. They've certainly happened to Charles Leclerc as well. And even if Hamilton is a couple of tenths off Leclerc, if the Ferrari is good, then Hamilton's through to Q3 comfortably, no issues, basically every weekend. That has clearly not been the case. And then the race begins, he crashes into Colapinto, the Sainz drama, it's all going on, and he says it's a nightmare, right? This is the strong statement. I wonder if this is the statement that Elkann felt like he needed to respond to, because I don't think that's what Hamilton is saying. I think he's saying that it's a nightmare scenario, like it's difficult, right? I think that's the implication. Maybe John Elkann has read this to kind of say, that his Ferrari dream is a nightmare, right? You could read this as Hamilton having a go at Ferrari, right? You could read it that way. I don't think that's at all what Hamilton's trying to say here, right? I don't know if it's like a difference between the way that like Brits would interpret this comment and Italians, I'm not sure. But I don't know if there's a little bit of misinterpretation here, because Elkann's comments feel quite targeted. And I don't know if it's because of this assessment from Hamilton, but he says, I've been living it for a while, the flip of between the dream of driving for this amazing team and the nightmare of the results that we've had, the ups and downs, it's challenging, which, you know, seems to me like a perfectly reasonable comment in the circumstances. So then Elkann comes out with his assessment. Now, as I say, this guy is the co-founder of Auto Racer, big Italian publication mostly focusing on Ferrari Formula 1. He says, I am dumbfounded. I don't know what to say anymore. So, you know, the Ferrari journalists are finding this remarkable what Elkann had to say today. This is what he had to say. Brazil was a great disappointment. If we look at the F1 Championship, we can say that our mechanics are winning the title with their performance and everything they've done in the pit stops. Fair enough, the mechanics have been very good. They've killed it this year. Their pit stops have been excellent. They've improved in that regard. How much is that of championship success? A pretty small percentage, let's be real. If we look at our engineers, there is no doubt the car has improved, but the rest is not at the required level. So, okay, the engineers have done a good job improving the car, apparently. I don't know if I've seen that personally, don't know if I've seen much evidence of that. Of course, the engineers also designed the car, and, you know, you can't pretend the car's actually good. So let's be honest, the Lift Coast 25, as people call it, or the SF Lyco, whatever, all the problems that this car has with regard to the brakes and just general performance, it works fine if you can run it at very low ride heights, but then you get disqualified wearing the plank. So, you know, that's the primary problem. And the rest is not at the required level. So, you know, is he talking strategy? But he's also talking drivers. And certainly we have drivers who need to focus on driving and talk less, because we still have important races ahead of us, and finishing seconds is not impossible. So, look, on some level, yes, second is still potentially on. Yes, Brazil was terrible. Yes, there are still a few races to go that are worth focusing on. But the implication, I mean, it's not even an implication, he just says it, that the drivers are the problem, right? I mean, there's no other way to look at it, really. We need drivers who think more about Ferrari and less about themselves. So, you know, quite the comment to make. Because, okay, yeah, well done, mechanics, excellent job. Well done, I don't know, Fred Vasseur. Well done, engineers, for making what's clearly a great car. It's obviously the drivers that are the problem. So, okay, let's just go through the drivers real quick. I find this hilarious for many reasons. Unfortunate, but also hilarious. You got Charles Leclerc, lives and breathes Ferrari. He loves Ferrari, right? Like, he will be... if he does leave Ferrari, and maybe he should, it will be a sad day, right? It really will. Charles Leclerc, arguably the fastest qualifier on the grid, certainly close. Max the other day was asked to build his best driver from any driver in history. And he basically said himself, for most of the questions, he then said Alonso for probably like, you know, racecraft or something like that. And then he said Leclerc for qualifying pace. So that shows how highly Leclerc is regarded. He's probably in his prime right now and is one of the fastest drivers, frankly, over a single lap to ever grace the sport. So that's one half of your driver pairing. The other half is, okay, maybe not the Hamilton that was in 2018, right? Prime Hamilton, whatever you want to say, but still an incredibly accomplished and quality driver who even has done pretty good things with Mercedes in this era of regulations as well. Still driving at a good level given his respective, you know, difference to Charles Leclerc. And also, let's not forget, the most winning driver in the sport of all time, a driver who was brought into this team to give insight and feedback and help the team on the path to success. That was the whole point in some regard. It's like, yeah, everyone knows bringing in Hamilton was a big PR thing for sure, but there was belief there that maybe if Hamilton doesn't win with this team, he will at least help set us up for the future, for us to become a team again that can win in the coming years. You look at McLaren, for example, this year. Norris, Piastri, neither of them have ever properly fought for a title before, certainly not a driver's title. Yes, they won the Constructors last year. Drivers with experience, but not much experience in the grand scheme of things. They've dominated the Constructors this year, and almost certainly one of the two, probably Lando, but we'll see, is going to win the Drivers' Championship as well. Ferrari, in the time that McLaren have had since their last Drivers' Championship win in 2008, Ferrari have had an unbelievable array of quality World Championship level drivers. And how many World Championships has that brought them? The answer is precisely 0 in that time frame. So, if you want to look at the drivers that Ferrari have had over the last couple of decades, and you want to say that it's the drivers that are the problem, I think there's probably another serious issue here behind the scenes, and it's not to do with the drivers. So that's what Elkann says. The engineers work to improve the car, the rest is not up to par, the drivers are a problem. I thought it was also remarkable at the end of his statement, he says, this is the important message from Bahrain. When Ferrari is a team, we win. So the implication is that the guys aren't on the same page, although there was rumours a while ago that Elkann was trying to get rid of Fred Vasseur and bring in, I don't know, somebody else, Horner or something, but some other. I think initially their plan was to get their WEC boss in instead. That was a rumour anyway, don't know how true that is, but there were rumours that they wanted to kind of split up the team, whereas actually Leclerc and Hamilton very happy with Vasseur. They want that to stay. That team element seems pretty good. So all of a sudden you've got John Elkann after Austin, who said full confidence in Vasseur, full confidence in the work that he's doing with the mechanics, the engineers, the drivers. And now he's saying, oh, well, our drivers need to talk less, focus on driving more, focus on Ferrari a bit more, and we're not a team. It's like, well, actually, are you not the one causing this problematic team dynamic, right? Like, on some level, the team looks okay until you step in and say, oh, no, actually, not happy with the drivers right now. It's quite a remarkable situation. Lots of Ferrari fans not very happy about this. I think the other entertaining thing about this from the outside looking in is the fact that, as far as we understand, John Elkann was hugely influential in signing Hamilton. Without Elkann, the Hamilton deal probably doesn't happen, right? Like, Elkann was the one, to our understanding effectively, who gave Lewis Hamilton the blank check to be like, look, we'll give you whatever you want. You're the man for the job. We think that you can help in this regard, in that regard. And, obviously we're going to do all the other things outside of the sport as well that are going to be good for our partnership. But it was clearly more to it than that. So, John Elkann, as far as we are aware anyway, was critical in making that happen. And now a few months later, apparently now the drivers are too selfish and all they care about is themselves and not Ferrari. I mean, it's remarkable. As I say, when you've got a team like that, okay, Hamilton, whatever happens next year, whatever, he's had his success on some level. It's Leclerc who I feel for, right? Who's been saddled with this. And I do wonder where, if anywhere, he goes next. The final thing I just wanted to comment on, really, Lando Norris's mentality. Because I was critical, and understandably, earlier this season, I think, of the way that Lando would talk in interviews, just his general demeanour, the downplaying of his own success to some degree. I feel like he's changed that to a certain extent. I think listening to Lando now, I hear a slightly different Lando. I hear a more confident Lando. I hear a Lando who is expecting the best of himself rather than the worst, it seems at times. And I don't think that's been like an overnight change, but I do feel like there's been something of a shift in his confidence as the season has gone on. He made an interesting statement on being the favourites in Vegas and basically said, I can't say that clearly because of what happened the last couple of years. Clearly kind of annoyed with the media for this line of questioning. But there were some comments he made, right? After he won the Grand Prix, the first thing he said was, damn, I didn't win it by enough. I only won it by 10 seconds. Would probably want to win it by 30 given where Max started, right? Won it by 30 last time out. If that's not a winning mentality, or certainly not if that's not getting there, I don't know what is. I don't know if that's something that Lando would have said earlier in the season, having won the Grand Prix and basically said I didn't win it by enough. I was impressed by that, right? Maybe some people don't like that. They don't like that assessment. But I like it, right? I think it's good to have that level of confidence to be like, we need to improve. I think that's also what I'm impressed by with Lando is that he's really looking for ways that himself and the team can improve all the time. There was the rumor that after Singapore, he sat them down, had a meeting and said, look, this is what I need from the car if we're actually going to keep winning in the coming years. And apparently they've at least done some degree in moving in that direction. But Lando was also asked, okay, you've got 3 races to go. Looks pretty good for the championship. And he said, well, I'm just imagining that I've got 20 races left and taking everything, one weekend at a time. And to some degree, it feels like he's done that. So, yeah, just wanted to give a few words on why I'm pretty impressed by Lando's recent form, and I think when you look at the whole package, it shouldn't be a massive surprise that he's really opened up a pretty sizable gap now. So very much enjoyed your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.